The other day, I was listening to this absolutely fascinating podcast with this psychologist. She owned her own consulting company. But before she owned her own consulting company that helped with marketing departments, she was a psychotherapist, a counselor. But she quit because of the idea of transference. Transference is when you're talking to somebody and you have deep rapport with them and you start to soak up some of their emotional state and they soak up some of your emotional state. But it's never an even back and forth. Sometimes one emotional state flows into the other person more so than this person's emotional state flows into this person. And if you're a counselor, you want to kind of sink deep down into your psyche and try to let the person open up so they feel comfortable. And you can kind of forget to turn back on your walls before you leave, and you end up soaking up too much of the negative emotional energy from the person you're talking to. This is the same type of things that people that are overly susceptible to emotional vampires, but it goes the other direction. They kind of are intuitive or they're empathic, and the other person, the emotional vampire, senses this and starts to steal all their energy. And she didn't like this because it was causing too many problems at home. And so she quit and got a job, or she started her own company to help out marketing companies using her psychology skills. And she was talking about all these fascinating subjects, particularly the ego. And she says the human ego is the happiness killer. The ego really gets in the way of a lot of stuff. She was saying that the human ego is very similar to our hunger instinct, and that it was calibrated for a time much differently than the one in which we live. Back in the days, having a super strong hunger instinct was a very good thing to have. But today, being obedient to your hunger instinct will get you killed. Similarly, the way our ego was calibrated back in the days of hunter-gatherers, the stronger your ego was, the more your ego was strong all the time, the better you could live your life. But today, you need to understand and manage your ego instinct, just like you need to understand and manage your hunger instinct. And she was saying the ego is very squirrely. It's very hard to understand. It's very intangible. And so it's hard to really see how the ego plays out. But she was saying that, for example, guilt, whenever we feel guilt, that's really an ego flex. Because if we feel guilty, we're imagining that something that we did or something that we didn't do is somehow harming another person, causing unhappiness to another person. But the main goal of the ego is to get us to feel and express our sense of agency. So if you have two different scenarios, one scenario where the person has zero agency, zero impact on another person, they won't feel any guilt because no matter what they do, this other person's not going to care. But in this situation where you imagine that you can harm this person, that means you have the power to control how they feel, which is where guilt comes from. So guilt rests on a hallucination that you have more agency than you really do. And whenever you lack assertiveness, it's really an ego flex, because people are non-assertive. They're afraid to set boundaries, according to this lady, because they're afraid if they set boundaries, they might harm some other person. They might withdraw themselves from some other person, which presupposes that your existence within this other person is necessary for them. But if that's a hallucination, you really don't have any agency, and that might cause ego death. So guilt and lack of assertiveness is a signal that you're trying to flex your ego. Also, she was saying that social anxiety is a function of the ego. If you imagine talking to somebody and you imagine flexing your ego onto that person to try to get some kind of an outcome, you imagine them doing the same thing because of our mirror neurons. Whenever we see someone, whenever we interact with someone, we try to imagine how they would behave, but how we imagine they would behave is based on how we imagine we would behave in that situation, which is a projection of our ego onto them. And so we imagine them coming back at us like we would come back at us, or we would come back at them if they came at us like we were coming at them. And we imagine having social anxiety. So the social anxiety is a result of this massively complex hallucination of an ego expression. But then she started talking about the double split experiment from quantum mechanics, and it kind of went over my head. The double split experiment is where you have a single split or a single hole in the wall, and you shine a photon through, and the photons will pile up on the screen like a pile of ping pong balls or whatever. But if you have two slits and you shine a wave through there, the waves will kind of interfere with each other. But if you shine one photon through at a time, they won't pile up in two piles, they'll interfere with each other, which kind of suggests that each individual photon kind of understands where all the other photons are going, or it somehow interferes with itself. This led to the mysterious weirdness of quantum mechanics. But she was saying this is kind of like marketing. If you have a marketing message that you broadcast to like 1,000 people, you can repeatedly get the same kind of percentages and tweak your marketing message and understand your demographics and see how that will tweak your marketing message. And so if you get like a 3% conversion, you can tweak your marketing message, or you can try different demographics to see how that will affect your conversion rates. But if you're talking to one single person and you have any kind of expectation, any kind of outcome, that's going to cause problems, because you cannot control the behavior of another person. You cannot predict the behavior of another person. So if you talk to one person and you have a strong outcome, you're essentially trying to get an outcome from something that you cannot predict, which is going to cause all kinds of stress. But she was saying that paradoxically, the best way to increase the likelihood of getting an outcome is to turn off your ego completely, turn off your sense of agency completely, and just enjoy being yourself without really caring what the other person does. And if you can achieve this state, if you can achieve the state of outcome independence, if you can achieve the state of ego-free agency and enjoy yourself, the other person will sense this, and they will sense that their agency is in danger because you don't care what they do. And if you don't care what they do, their need to feel agency will be in trouble, and they will start to qualify themselves to you. They will start to do whatever they can to gain your approval, which means they will do whatever you want so long as you connect that action with their approval. And she was saying this is the easiest way, the most dead simple way, the brainless way, the most brainless way to persuade somebody in a one-on-one situation. If you're blasting out a marketing message, you can tweak everything, measure all your metrics. But if you're talking to one person, the easiest, most guaranteed way to persuade somebody, to seduce somebody, is to turn off your ego completely, to turn off your agency completely, and just enjoy being yourself while you genuinely don't care what the other person does. And she was saying that turning off the ego in a conversational setting is the secret to everything.